don't have to fight, we don't have to kill. Everybody in the whole wide world really just needs to chill. No, we don't have to fuss, no, we don't have to fight.
Hello, welcome back to Just Chill with Oliver George. This is episode 14, and I just want to say before we get started here, please subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have, thank you so much. Share with your friends if you dig this show, because we just want to keep the viewership growing. Second of all, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you haven't checked out the YouTube version, then come see what we look like. Contact info if you want to get in touch with the show. It's justchillpodcasting@gmail.com. And time to bring in the guest here. Old friend. It's kind of weird. This all just kind of worked out. But Peter Andrew Lusztyk. You're going by Peter now too, right?
Yeah, and your pronunciation of my last name was impeccable, so I appreciate
that.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. But you adjusted your first name is actually Piotr,
I mean,
right?
I have a weird one because my first name on my passport is spelled with the Polish spelling, which is Piotr.
Yeah.
And then my middle name is Englishized, which is Andrew. Like my official, government name is Peter Andrew Lusztyk. And then
doesn't the Andrew kind of stands out?
Yeah,
there,
it's kind of weird. So as soon as I left high school and I was introducing myself to new friends, is that my phone doing that? Shit, I'm sorry.
Is it your camera? Oh, it's the camera here dying probably.
Okay, cool. Anyways, long story short, when I was introducing myself for the first time to a bunch of new people when I moved away from Ottawa, I would just introduce myself as Peter, so I kind of saved the explanation. So when I see friends from high school, they still call me by my nickname, I guess, which is like a bastardized version of my real name, which is Piotr, but they call me Piotr.
Piotr, that's how I know you.
Yeah. And then when I'm, to my friends that I made, since moving away from Ottawa, it's always Peter. So
I should say, before we keep going on about your name, sort of a little bit about you. You're a photographer / artist, I would call you as well, just so people know like why you're here, essentially, to talk about your craft.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm a photographer, artist, and thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on.
I watched a couple episodes, and I feel very honored to be here. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Yeah, your message when you just told me that you dug the show actually really meant a lot. Anytime you get positive feedback, people are watching and they give a shit, it's always really refreshing. We're doing this because we're having fun, but it's great to know that we're connecting with people too.
Dude, I just love people that are doing stuff. It doesn't even not that this is the case with you, but like even if it's something that I'm not into, but if I meet somebody and they're really passionate about indoor plants, I'm like, okay,
just being passionate about anything.
Yeah, and it's I think just doing stuff goes so far because I try to force myself to lose myself in hobbies as much as possible, because if you're just left there sort of twiddling your thumbs and watching Netflix, it kind of doesn't lead to shit. So
sorry, I was just gonna say, and hobbies is a broad term. Like you could say that watching sports is a hobby, but I would think go a step further and creating things really is so rewarding.
It is so rewarding, and I want to honor that, and thank you for allowing me to be here. I think
of course,
really good. Yeah.
No, I think you have a lot of really interesting things that you can share with our audience. So I'm excited to ask you about a lot of your work. But it is cool also just catching up that we both grew up in Beacon Hill, represent the east end of Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And I actually have a memory from when I was in grade 9, I guess, and hanging out with the older kids, and you would have been one of them, where my parents were gone for 2 weeks to some vacation to Britain or whatever. Yeah. Well, we didn't wreck the place, but we had what they call a Jamaican shower. I don't know if that's still
an appropriate term. Hot box.
Yeah, in the bathroom, where you get the shower going and then you smoke and it sticks to the air.
No. That's fuck, man. I
don't think my dad knew
no
that.
recollection of that. Probably not surprisingly, but I guess I was. Did we skip school and smoke weed in your parents'
I'm assuming it was
bathroom?
like a lunch break. We're like, we don't have to go back or some shit.
Well, I appreciate the hospitality.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up honestly because I thought it was funny thinking about that today, and my dad has no idea still.
Thanks for hosting that. Yeah.
As for your photography, I told you this before we started, but I had seen some of your stuff. I had followed some of your work through Facebook and whatever, as you do with sort of following high school acquaintances and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But today I tried to delve a little deeper and went to your website and just continue to be blown away by your work, man. It's next level, just amazing, amazing photography.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, it means a lot.
Well, and not just the quality of your work, but the what would you call it, the themes and sort of the projects that you chose to work on. Each one was just like, I was reading the little write-ups and getting sucked right in, and then I don't know. That's kind of what all my questions are about today. Just your work and the great stuff that you're doing.
Well, thanks for taking the time to absorb all that, man. That's
It was hard to absorb it all because there's so much. But the first one that I remember, like years ago, being aware of was your interchanges.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm going to let you kind of describe a lot of these.
Well, what the Interchanges series was all about, it was, this is, I guess, started in like 2007, 2008, right around the time I had to kind of get out of assisting as a photographer and trying to work professionally as a photographer. And I thought one thing that I was always captivated by since I was a kid, flying into Pearson Airport in Toronto with my parents after vacation, just looking down at the highway and seeing sort of the intricate web of, different roads connecting to each other. And it looked like a, futuristic spider web from space. Those interchanges in Toronto, that connect the 401 to the other sort of arterial highways, are some of the most intricate and the biggest ones in the world. And I started a project shooting highway interchanges initially in Toronto, and then
was this like you would go in helicopter?
Helicopters and small planes, yeah.
And drones? Did you use it all?
No, this is sort of predates drones by about 7-8 years, which I
mainstream drone, like
affordable
drones, yeah.
Exactly, and flying cameras essentially, which is what they call drones.
I'm sure the military had them in the 90s.
Probably not quite HD, but absolutely. But anyway, so I shot the first stuff out of like Cessnas. With the door off, which sounds scarier than it is. It's pretty standard in those types of aircraft.
So it must have been a rush, though.
Oh, it was cool. Yeah, it was really cool. And you got to kind of take the plane into what's called a full oblique, which means that the wings are basically perpendicular to the surface of the Earth, so you get a straight down perspective.
That's pretty. So you're strapped in pretty tight.
It's not really. It's a seatbelt, sort of like you see in a car. It's not like
it doesn't pull you to the side, the G-force, or
if you really wanted to jump out of the plane, it'd be pretty easy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you're strapped in with a seatbelt.
Well, I'm just trying to imagine, especially if you're trying to take pictures on top of that, right? You can't really be holding on or bracing yourself. If you're trying to...
to be honest too, like, it's pretty terrifying, but from my experience doing a lot of these now, you're pretty locked in on what you're doing, and you're sort of watching the image sort of compose itself, and you're waiting and click, 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 and in that time you almost lose yourself in what you're seeing through the viewfinder, and you're not so focused on the fact that you're suspended 2,000 feet above the highway.
Takes a hold,
and I think that series was really was the foundation of my career, because at the time, of course, I'm not the first person to take photographs of highway interchanges, nor will I be the last. Those images, especially with the advent of drones, are more and more ubiquitous now.
Yeah.
But at the time, I think it was the first sort of assembly of, high resolution, high quality images of that subject. And
they're amazing shots. Yeah.
Thank you.
And what you had said about, I had written that down when you mentioned the arteries and the veins of a city. I thought that was a really cool sort of analogy.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore that analogy, just by looking at it. Just the movement, the traffic, being the blood cells and the roadways
you
being
cut
the
them
arteries.
off and the lifeline basically stops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was a neat project too, because I'd be, say, in Phoenix or in London on an unrelated assignment or an unrelated project, and I'd literally just take time, in the evening at the hotel, kind of like looking on Google Maps and being like, oh my God, there's some really great ones here. And then I kind of learned the process, which is not very complicated. It's
That's
like
cool.
Contact the local airport, like where there's a flight school.
Yeah.
Get in touch with an instructor and book a time, and it's and it sort of became this.
You could like hunt down the ones you really
Yeah, it was a bit
wanted.
of a ritual. Whatever city or place or part of the world I found myself in, and
That's
to this
so
day that goes on. You know, like
Really?
there's
Yeah, you
still
keep up with it?
there's still some that I want to shoot. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well, I was always amazed when I saw the pictures at just the symmetry, and it kind of reminded me of crop circles almost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just those patterns that seem so infinite almost. And it's just a really cool project because it's something that you see every day, and with a slight shift, it's like a whole new world. You know, we were used to seeing highways just like this, very boring, and you don't really see the grand picture.
Yeah, I mean, I always say this when I talk about this project, but like, you know, you're driving on the highway and it just looks like a series of bridges that you sort of ignore when you're driving, and then
Yeah.
you look at it from an aerial perspective and it's
Like a flower or
it's
you
a
know.
clover or whatever. It's
Yeah.
surreal. It doesn't it looks like it came from out of space.
And you find probably still a lot of variety within that, though.
For sure.
From place to place.
Yeah, and I think that some of the new ones that they're building in China and stuff are you know, some of the most intricate and largest ones in the world, and they're new and they're different. And you know, not long ago, before you know, it sort of became maybe a little bit riskier to travel to China as a Canadian. There was talk about
It's the
doing
Huawei stuff. Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And there was talk about expanding this project into China. And I actually had some stuff lined up. A very good friend of mine, who was an assistant of mine for a time, is a Chinese guy, and we were talking with him and this German director who had a contact with a drone pilot in China that was going to work with us, because unlike the rest of most of the world, where you can fly into a city like London or Vancouver and you know, find a heliport and book a helicopter or a small plane for
Pretty
an hour.
easily, yeah.
Yeah, in China that's absolutely not the case.
You need like a bunch of special permissions.
And even then, it's actually not. It's just challenging. They just like helicopter tourism is in its infancy and extremely weird and hard to get permits for. So we were going to do it with drones, and the way that they do it is they send up like a little guy, like a little drone that you could, you know,
scout with.
yeah, you know, not high resolution, you know, closed system camera. You tell them sort of, okay, that's what it looks like. That's where I kind of want. And then they send up like the big boy octocopter with like the high resolution camera on top, with a very minimal window within which you can get the image that you want.
Wow.
And I know this because I was working with a German director who does, like, you know, sort of really high-end car commercials in the Asian market, and that's basically how he had amassed a lot of that aerial footage. It was exactly that way. So, but that's kind of out the window now until just stuff calms down.
Yeah, there's so much going on over there right now. Oh man.
Yeah, I don't want to phone home and tell my parents I'm in a Chinese prison because I was trying to take aerial photography of highways in China.
Yeah, it might not be worth it at that point.
No.
And if I read this correctly on your website, this was in National Geographic, some of these?
Yeah, I mean, again, prior to the advent of high-quality drones, these images were far less omnipresent in the photosphere, and yeah, so they picked up a lot of traction. They were
It was
national.
very innovative at the time.
I think so. I mean, they were in National Geographic.
That right there is amazing.
Just
dude.
off
I'm
the
like,
top-
why is he on our show? Fuck.
It's not. Well, I appreciate that, but it was a long time ago, and they got picked up by Apple as the screensaver for the first generation iPad Pro. They
insane,
got
too.
used for the Audi brand catalog as like one of the spreads on the I think 2013 or 2014 Audi brand catalog. So I got a lot of
That's amazing, dude.
good traction out of them. Yeah, they've been shown in the States and stuff. It was it's been a great project, and it's never gonna stop. Like, I'm gonna keep shooting that.
That option's always going to be there, yeah. And like when you were doing that, what places did you go besides?
Well, the most
Toronto
recent one that I shot was in Nagoya in Japan.
Oh, cool.
Which was a really cool experience. We flew out of a Japanese Air Force base, and in Nagoya, and
They were as strict as China, or no?
oh no, they were super cool, and I don't know if you've ever been to Japan before. But
No, it seems really like a cool place to go, though.
It's the best. Like, just looking around this room, you'd lose your mind.
I've never been that into anime as much, though.
It doesn't matter.
I like some, but...
You got Mario.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, you got all this comic stuff. Like, they go crazy for it.
I love the vibe from Japan,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah.
There's unlimited. They have consumerism down to a fucking science. More than anywhere else I've ever been. Like, there's unlimited opportunity to buy cool stuff.
And I heard a lot of history. I can't remember what I watched, but it was about the history of Japan back in like feudal times or whatever. And art history there is pretty insane.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know that much about it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try and reiterate what I had seen months ago, but I remember being really interested by it. And there was something about a big art wave and a big movement there. This is a long, long time ago, though. But yeah, I don't know that much.
When you go there, there's no Uber, but they have taxis, and when you take a taxi, it's a really big deal. Like, the guy will get out, open the door for you, white gloves,
Wow,
and really polite. And even if they don't speak English, they try their ass off to make it the best experience possible. It's not a cheap thing to do, but it's not crazy expensive either. But it's like, you take a cab across town, it's going to cost you $40. Like, same as here, maybe a little cheaper. Point is, when we were flying in the helicopter, the helicopter pilot had little white gloves that he was using to steer the helicopter, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, definitely not the case.
James Bond role.
Yeah, they don't do that when you're flying above Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah. Some guy named Gus.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy.
Oh, man. Yeah, well, that sounds like it's just a super fun project to do.
Yeah, it's been really cool, man. I got a lot of good experiences from that. Weird places in the States that you would probably never go,
Yeah, because you're going there for the highways.
For the highways, yeah. So, just even, I remember just driving around on my own, in a rental car in my late 20s, and like, now you're in Amarillo, or like now you're in Jacksonville, or, not that those are places that weird, but I'd never really find myself there otherwise, probably.
No, that's so cool. Just to get little bits of culture here and there as you go. Yeah, man. Okay, well, the second one of your sort of pieces or whatever you call these themes or series, that I do also remember seeing years ago was the what's the actual one? The Point Blank, with this is very up close shots of guns, and sometimes like very tall too, like 5 feet. You would print them out.
Yeah, or 8 feet, some of them. Yeah.
Again, it's probably easier to you just explain it than me to try to.
Oh yeah, well,
badly describe it.
Point Blank project was a collaboration with myself and a really good buddy of mine who works in advertising, guy named Derek Blay. And, he came together with me, and we found these charcoal drawings by this artist named Robert Longo, who actually directed a movie named Johnny Mnemonic. Remember?
My dad knows that. Like, I
remember
that
movie.
About that when I was a kid.
Yeah, so he directed that movie.
Oh, crazy.
And he was kind of this artist that came out of the New York 80s scene, and he does these beautiful, hyper detailed charcoal drawings of different stuff that is sort of really macho, and I really like he did a series on mushroom clouds, and what he would do is he'd project images onto a paper or some kind of canvas, and then trace them with charcoal, and then the results are remarkable. They look almost as detailed as photographs until you stick your nose in it and you realize that no, this is actually a drawing.
Wow.
And he did these charcoal drawings of big guns, like shot exactly or drawn exactly like I shot them. And in looking at them, because first I thought they were photographs, then I realized that they were drawings, and then when looking at them, I noticed that because he's actually tracing a projected photograph, there's a sharpness fall off. You could see sort of the part of the gun that the camera had been focused on was sharp, and then the rest of the gun would sort of fall off into being out of focus. It's just the nature of the mechanics of the photography, and I developed a system where I would stack the focus. So I would focus on each sort of element of the gun, each piece of the gun, and then cut it apart in Photoshop. So each piece that was in focus, I would cut apart and then reassemble it to give that illusion that the depth of field was infinite. So I was sort of solving the problem that I guess whoever way back had shot the photographs that he then drew, and I then shot photographs in a way that took away that depth of field sharpness fall off issue. And that's sort of how that came about. And that's why you get that sort of hyper realistic sort of illustrative look at the same time. So it kind of comes full circle because they look more illustrated because there is no sharpness fall offs, even though they're photographs that were influenced or directly inspired by drawings that were of a photograph. And that's how that kind of came about. And in the process of creating them, I sort of invented this technique or whatever, and then we sort of did the whole span of different handguns. We worked with this place called the Movie Armaments Group in Toronto, and they
I just assumed it would be in the States.
No, it was in Toronto. I actually have become friends with these guys, and they own a gun vault that rents it's like an armory basically, and they rent all the guns for all the movies that are shot in Toronto. So if they do like a RoboCop or the Hulk, or
so they're all like prop guns, like
they're real. They're all real.
You just load them with blanks, I guess, right?
You load them with blanks, yeah, exactly. But they have 100% prohibited like military guns. They have sniper rifles, anti-aircraft guns.
Crazy. This
place is completely insane, and they're understandably super paranoid about any changes to the gun legislation in Canada because you could shut them down. But you can go in there and there's thousands of different handguns to choose from, and they were really cool. And they let us, for a very small fee, let us kind of go in there and just play and like experiment. And then again, this is almost 10 years ago now when we started this project, but it's grown. And then what's really cool is people will contact me and say, "Listen, I have this gun that was given to me by my dad, and I really want to, so I'll do like custom commissions for people, and they've been displayed around the world and stuff." And
I just wrote down a couple of them because it said you had something, one of them appear in Netflix somewhere on Hemlock Grove. Yeah, that's
right. Hemlock Grove purchased one for set dressing in season 1, and it had a pretty like prominent placement in the house of the main character. I didn't really follow the series that much, but I've had a lot of people recognize the work from that show. So
that's awesome. Yeah, and it also said that Wired, which I know my dad reads, and Esquire.
Yeah. So it's cool too because it'll be like Esquire or Ukraine will then pick it up, because it's cool because they work obviously in every language and every sort of district. Like people get it. It's big scary totems of these things, and I think what's particularly nice about that project is it gets people talking, and it's this thing where it's like you realize that as in their form, these objects are actually kind of attracted, but then you're disgusted by the fact that you're actually like,
what can be done with them.
Yeah, it's almost like if Hitler was sexy. Not that he is, but you know what I'm saying?
I get the point you're making. Yeah, completely. And I also noted that you had talked about how it's just the sheer fact of like staring down the barrel of a gun in itself is just so like intimidating, and then you're magnifying it on such a gigantic scale. It's like it's a really interesting idea.
Thanks, man. I mean, I always find the most interesting projects for me are start as an experiment. Like going back to the highway thing too, like. In shooting at the side of a plane, I had to teach myself techniques in order to make that work and be able to have high resolution images that are in focus and super sharp and that could be blown up huge while everything's moving. So you've got to sort of figure out like the puzzle of like, okay, how would I do this? And the same with this, like in trying to make super high resolution, in focus, infinite depth of field images of handguns, like you sort of teach yourself a technique. And I think what the projects that generally excite me, it's like it's that problem solving initially, and then applying that to a subject that is meaningful.
No, I see what you're saying. It starts off as just kind of an idea, but then it develops into something that's now like part of your brand, and and that's why I think it works so well because you've got such unique projects that like it's going to become your thing, because it's so different. People are going to remember you for that and associate you with those projects.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's I don't know, man. Like I just kept being blown away. Everything I checked out, and then the stories behind everything was always very interesting too. This next one I want to bring up because it ties into two things I wanted to talk to you about. So the first thing I'll bring up is just the project itself, which is the Uncanny Valley, which was so cool. I didn't fully understand what this was. Originally, I thought you were finding look-alike people and dressing them up and taking their photos. But then I was like, no, this is too this looks too much like this celebrity. So what it was you went and photographed people at not people rather, but the museum. Jesus Christ, I'm butchering this. The wax museum figures at Madame Tussauds, and with great cameras and HD quality and all that.
Yeah.
But from what I gathered on the website is like the reason they look so shitty when you're in person, which I agree. When I've seen the one in Niagara Falls, they just kind of look like the people. But then you explain that that's because your brain has like this perception when you're interacting with a 3D element.
Yeah.
So you have more of an expectation, and I guess of the different angles and that.
Well, yeah.
That's what I gathered.
That's a very like good synopsis of the theory. But I guess
because in the end, the still photos you took, it's like uncanny. They look so much like the person. Same.
When you're standing in front of a replicant of Bruce Lee or whoever, or Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie, and it doesn't matter how good that sculpture is, you automatically have an expectation that thing's gonna either blink and start breathing and start being alive or not. Your body's just programmed to understand that if this thing it's Han Solo, it's frozen, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So no matter how good that replica is, because there is that level of interaction, then you don't buy it ever.
It's just this disconnect.
You're never gonna buy it. But when you remove that expectation and you bring it into 2D, all of a sudden, the cheat or the con is that, okay, well, this thing is not gonna. There's no expectation that a two-dimensional image is going to move, so you're much more likely to kind of
accepts it.
Your brain just accepts that it's the real thing.
And that's the term uncanny valley?
No. That's sort of the trick used in order to test the theory. The uncanny valley theory. There's a Japanese robotics professor, Masahiro Mori, I believe is his name, and I think he's still alive. If he is, he's like 105. And he coined the term uncanny valley theory in the 1970s. And basically what it posits is that if you're looking, it's in really layman's terms, it's that feeling when you're in the department store and you feel the presence of somebody sort of in your periphery, and you're kind of just, you're used to that as a person. Like I could feel your dad over there, even though I'm not looking right at him. And then you look over and it's a mannequin and you're kind of like grossed out.
Okay.
That's the theory, is that we have a level of unease or disgust upon realizing that something that we thought was a person or a human isn't. That's what the theory is, and he has it. This
ties into AI and all that, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to test that theory, and I guess the failure of my project, which is ultimately a good thing, is that most people don't realize what they're looking at isn't the real thing because the sculptures are so good, and because of that con.
There
of the
were
image.
a few.
Sure.
That I can't remember. Justin Bieber, I thought was like, no, this is still a wax statue.
Absolutely.
But some were friggin' insane.
Of course, and I guess the thing is too, it's like, how, if you saw that removed from a web page explaining the fact that this is a photography project or whatever, there definitely are some that you sense that something's off, but
catch it, yeah.
But like you said, you're like, is this?
I'll put up the Snoop Dogg one though, because that's
there's a few that are great.
Nuts.
There's a few that are great, but I guess my thing is like, is this a lookalike? You know what I mean? But I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think most people's brain doesn't immediately go like, oh, this is a sculpture.
Yeah, they don't just jump to this as an inanimate, like, wax person. No, I agree. I think people would think it was like a lookalike, which is what I thought. I thought you had found a guy that looked like Donald Trump, and you just, like, did him in that Trump style and then shot it from the right way or whatever. But this is equally as cool, if not more so.
And then what happened with that project is I went to Las Vegas, and I went to Washington, D.C., and I got permission to go and shoot in there and stuff. And then I was like, okay, what's the thing to bring this to the masses or to test this theory beyond having it, a show in a gallery somewhere? Like, what do I do? So a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, it was a relatively recent project. There's these 6x4 frames on the sides of convenience stores in Toronto that are usually, populated by Lotto
Like a
640.
milk ad or something.
Yeah, Lotto 649 ad or whatever.
I know what you're talking about.
There's these glass frames that were exactly 4x6, which is the aspect ratio of your normal.
It's like a movie poster size kind of, right? Yeah.
And they're empty because there was this weird ban that happened, and there's this window of time where there's this ban that happened where those kinds of advertising, that kind of advertising was being no longer permitted in the city of Toronto.
Commissioned or
So these
whatever,
perfect frames that were just sitting there.
I was going to ask you about this because I was going to say, did you have to rent these or what?
No, they're just sitting there empty. So I took all you need is like a hex head screwdriver thing, and I just zipped them open, and I printed the images to that exact scale.
Yeah.
And closed them back up, and then just sat back and watched.
That's amazing.
Watched people freak out because
that's like a real artist move too.
Well, it was to test the theory, within hours basically, because I think our brains are so programmed to sort of scan the city for imagery and advertising, and it's just the way we interact with an urban environment. And people started seeing that, and they're like, be driving along, and there goes Bruce Willis, and there's Mike Tyson, and eventually people are like, well, what the fuck is going on? Is this a movie that's coming out? There's no copy, there's no words or text. It's just the image.
Yeah, no, I saw it. There was Zach Galifianakis.
And so people obviously started, because the world we live in, people started putting it up on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and then it started all these blogs and stuff started picking it up, and it actually, in a cool way, sort of brought this project in front of way more people than if it just appeared in a gallery somewhere or something.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's the vague nature that you chose to go about it kind of gets people so curious, I'm sure it had a Reddit thread or something.
All that stuff.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's kind of a joke, but I think it really worked, and I guess the reason I brought that up is nobody realized what it was. Nobody realized on all this crap I read in the comment sections, nobody was like, oh, these are fakes. They're all like, what's the movie is this? This is an album that's coming out.
Yeah.
People started stealing them. People put graffiti on them.
But no one was questioning the authenticity of the human being in the picture. That's nuts. But that proves that you kind of were right, Or is that what you were expecting was going to happen?
I thought people would figure it out. I thought that the Uncanny Valley would prove true, and people would be like, oh, wait a minute, what the fuck are we looking at?
This.
And it wasn't. It was what's going on. It was people bought it hook, line, and sinker.
I wonder if that's like a scale thing. If you're walking from across the street, it's pretty far away. It's kind of far enough that you might not catch those smaller details, that give it away if you're right up close.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame it didn't last longer, and the discussion couldn't continue. But within 2 weeks, they were all stolen, taken down.
And eventually they removed those things from the buildings, I guess?
Nobody, the people removed them.
No, I mean you said they were
those glass.
Yeah.
There's a few that stuck around. A lot of them are gone though.
You could always throw one up for old time's sake.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing a big one somewhere, but anyway.
Yeah, well, another really interesting project that people will have to check out. I'll show a few, but please check out his website. And you must be on Instagram, right?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram.
I'm surprised I don't already follow you on there. But.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, what is it? Might as well say that
I think
now.
it's just my full name, Peter Andrew Lusztyk, at Peter Andrew Lusztyk.
Right on. Okay, we'll check that shit out. Follow this guy. A couple other things we just quickly pass over, but I thought they related to this show that were on your page. So you did one thing about collectibles, which is obviously applicable here. And the other one was the Tokyo Smoke campaign you did, which is also weed related, so kind of ties into this show.
Yeah.
Really nice work again.
Thank you. The amount of sort of money getting thrown around, less so now, but especially, in the early part of the sort of legalization process by these companies was insane. And as a photographer, I got a very, 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 very small piece of that. But just the fact that they were commissioning people like myself to photograph, bongs and pipes and fucking rolling papers is
supposed to help them sell, I guess.
Yeah, but I wonder though, who needs? Is there really a market for a $700 bong thing? A little bit, probably.
Is that how much it costs?
I don't know, but it's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
And Tokyo Smoke has definitely sort of gone after a super high end demographic, and they built the guy who designed and creative directed that shoot, my friend Brian from Castor Design. I mean, he's been working with these brands for like the last 3 or 4 years, I'm assuming getting paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars to design glassware for marijuana use, which is crazy, and the amount of money that they're sort of throwing around and throwing at the stuff, again, commissioning, one of the best designers in the country, commissioning myself, I'm not the best photographer in the country, but it's also not cheap to do,
I understand the point you're making, because to tie it into this show, kind of, one of the reasons this podcast started was because last year, I guess a little more over a year now, but about a year ago, actually, I was in the finals for this thing. My dad had told me about this contest with a weed company called A Lot out of Toronto. And they had a search to find Canada's cannabis connoisseurs. And it was like a position for a year, I think it was supposed to be, where originally they said it was going to be 5. I think they ended up hiring 8. But it was, $1,000 a month to sample strains and like write reviews. And they were looking for really interesting people that had different things they could offer. Like they wanted one person that was the medical user and one person who was the creative type. And anyways, I kind of just put my hat in the ring just because why not, right? The dream job kind of nature of that.
You're a professional weed tester.
Yeah, exactly. And it dawned on me at that time when I started thinking, hey, maybe I should put it in, that all the stuff I had put up on YouTube previously was all like weed related comedy, or like I just had a lot of weed heavy material already. So I was like, all right, I might as well try and send this shit. And I just kept making it through, and I ended up making it to the final 25 out of like 25,000 applicants. Yeah, so it was amazing, but then extra crushing when I didn't get through to the but it set all this into motion, and I was just kind of tying that in because they must have had some money to throw around if they're paying people to smoke.
They had so much money to throw around.
Yeah,
it's insane. I mean, I just got flown out to shoot the Organogram facility in Moncton, New Brunswick, and
haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, Organogram. I think the what's it
weed
called?
Company, like they grow
huge weed operation, like style of like like a. I think Canopy's another huge one, and
speaking of which,
there you go. Yeah, and I mean their facility was insane. I've never seen anything like it. I'm trying to remember what the name of the actual brand of weed is that Organogram grows. Edison. Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah.
So that's who it was for. It was for Edison.
Okay, cool. We've got some more rights though.
Yeah. So I was shooting for them. I mean, it's the fact that that's trickling down to me must mean that there's so many people getting paid and getting hired to do stuff, and it's great. So that's what that stuff was for.
I think that boom is it's not over, but it's hit a lull from what I've heard. I had a buddy who invested a bunch in weed stocks, and right now he's in like a low spot. He should have sold a while ago, and he's banking on when the beverages and stuff start coming out and the edibles hit in a more prominent way, that the stocks will go back up. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, not to hurt anyone's feelings that might be listening to this that's got like a bunch of money invested in weed, but like my question was always like, there's only so many people that smoke weed. Like the fact that it's legalized now, in my opinion, is fantastic, but it's not like there's all of a sudden going to be this like explosion in consumption. You know what I think? Like,
yes and no, because there's definitely going to be people come out of the woodwork that were really paranoid about getting in trouble.
A little bit.
There's some of that.
And there's people who are going to smoke for the first time because
that's what I was going to say. There's always a new wave of
by the book people that were just like, it's like this. It's like if they said on the highway, guess what? The speed limit on the 401 is now 200 kilometers an hour. Yeah, there's going to be the few assholes that want to like test out their Ferrari.
Autobahn,
but
shit. Yeah.
Most people are probably going to hover around that like 130, 120, maybe, like.
And they'll just be happy not to be as restricted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and I kind of use the same analogy in thinking about the marijuana thing. It's like where is all this consumption going to come from? And like they're fucking growing it. Like I went into that place in Moncton. And like, they're making hundreds and hundreds of pounds of weed a day, if not thousands. I don't know what the actual number is, but like
it's a lot. Yeah.
Who's gonna smoke all this shit?
Yeah.
Like if a guy like you, like I'm assuming you're a regular smoker. Like
I vape more than I smoke. I try.
What are you gonna smoke? Like a couple grams a day.
About 2 grams a day.
You know what I'm saying?
Maybe
like
3.
what's that? And like what's that? $20? It's not cocaine. It's not 200.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So it's like. I don't know. Like, I just don't know where the fortune's going to come from where it's all going to come back to these companies because it's like, weed's kind of cheap. You know, it's not an expensive thing.
It could be cheaper, man, if you ask me.
Sure, it could be cheaper, but it's like I said, it's not $100 a gram.
No. We were talking about this in the last episode, but I find the stuff at the stores when you actually go by, or I guess assuming it's the same on the Ontario cannabis website or whatever, but I find it pretty. It's like high school prices at best.
Cheaper. I think it's cheaper than high school. Like a good gram of weed in high school is $15. I thought.
If you want to get the good shit at the store, you're paying like almost that much. $13.99 for a
But,
gram.
I mean,
yeah.
Consider this back in 1996 or whatever. You know,
True.
But fair enough. So
minor inflation or whatever.
So
Yeah.
it hasn't like gone up exponentially, I guess is what I'm saying. So I was always just curious, like, okay, well, because these companies were, bolstered by this speculation that there's going to be all this money fucking pouring in. So now here we are. It's been legal for, 5 years almost? Not actually, that's not true. Fully legal for two
I
year
think,
and
right?
a half.
I think it was
It's October last year, wasn't it?
2017 or 2018.
Not even full 2 years. Yeah.
I thought it was 2017, but maybe
No,
it was 2018.
it was 2018 in like October.
Oh, so it's a
It
year and a
shot
half, yeah.
Something to do with the.
Yeah, that sounds about right, actually.
I guess my point is that like it's been here for a while, and it's not like that. Like there's like exponential growth in the marijuana market, in the consumption side. And so fine.
Yeah, consumption side for sure. Yeah.
So fine, they could put it in fucking pop, and they could put it in popcorn, and they can you could put it in gum. Unless they're going to start putting the shit in like vending machines in schools. Or I don't know what. Like
I doubt it. I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not. But you know what I mean? Like, what are they going to do? Like, how are they going to?
Maybe in colleges, I guess.
How are they going to convince people to smoke more to make their money back? So I've heard theories that like, oh, well, they're going to start exporting it to fucking Australia and Germany, markets where it's like soon to be legalized, but they're not in the production side yet. So,
But even that'll eventually have a cap.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So I just think I think it's a bit of a bubble. I hope not, because like I said, I'm on a very small way on the receiving end of some of that. Money.
It has to plateau eventually, like in the way that
I think
alcohol.
it's plateaued.
Alcohol, I don't know. As far as I know, isn't on some continuous.
That's what I'm saying. There's
yeah.
only so many people that are going to be chronic alcohol users that are drinking a 26er a day or a 6-pack a day, and there's only so many people that are going to be chronic marijuana smokers. Smoking 3-4 grams a day. It's there's just not all of a sudden going to be this explosion in people using it.
True. I think that they've got some growth with like being able to change how they're distributing it, like through beverages or whatever, because there's still untapped customers there who are like, well, I never thought I could drink it, and then that gets them on board or whatever. But because booze, you basically drink it.
I also think it's not addictive enough.
Lifestyle can be addictive, but not
the same way booze is. Not the same way
yeah.
cigarettes are. You know what I mean? Like.
You're not going to go into like shaking withdrawal or whatever. Like
fair enough, and you're also not going to like take a sip of a $5 can of weed, and then all of a sudden be like, "Fuck, I got to drink 20 of these a day now."
Yeah,
ever.
Weed just doesn't work the same way. Getting super high is not the same as getting super drunk.
No.
It just isn't.
And there's not that like urge to. It's not a drug that's like more.
No, not in a big way. And well, I get that urge, but it's generally more of like this side of it of just like, oh, I like the smoke coming in and out of my mouth. And
same way smokers like just smoking.
Well, I smoked cigarettes for 9 years, so I think that's where a lot of that comes from. Is one of the reasons I was able to quit cigarettes was through joint smoking. So. Which
is probably healthier for you in the long run, anyways.
Oh yeah, and and then the next switch was trying to go vaping most of the time. Mm-hmm. But like in a day where I'm vaping most of the day, at the end of the day, sometimes I still just want a joint. There's just something the draw is a little thicker, and it just.
I find it gets you more fucked up.
I find it gets me fucked up in a different way. Mm-hmm. I don't even like the term "fucked up" because I don't really ever feel fucked up from weed these days. Like,
well, whatever, you get more of a sensation.
Yeah, it's definitely a different vibe for sure. If you vape, it's like very, it can creep up on you. It's very clean high, whereas like when you smoke a joint, you're kind of like, you got that haze.
Well, part of the reason I basically stopped smoking weed is because of vaping.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I.
What do you mean?
Well, fuck, dude. I was like you. I'd smoke weed basically every day from like.
Oh, I remember.
14 to 29. Every fucking day. With obviously if I had the flu one day, maybe not, but like basically, if I was in a municipality or a nationality where marijuana was available, I was smoking it, even if I was traveling, So like with very few lulls, I smoked weed pretty chronically from like fucking 14 to 29. And then, this is how kind of new this all is. Like vaping to me was those volcano things, which I'm sure still exist.
I think that's where most of us started.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's like kind of when I first.
The big bag that fills up? Yeah.
Which is kind of ludicrous to think of now that that's what vaping was. And there's probably somebody out there still doing it, but it's.
You know what I remember? I remember seeing that big bag and thinking that it wasn't nearly as cool as how it sounded. I was like, oh, we're gonna vaporize, like, you know what I mean? And then you're just like, oh, we're gonna fill this bag up. Vaporize sounds so sci-fi, you know? Like,
sure, it looked pretty goofy. You know, you got this like, and then the crackle of like the shopping bag thing that when you're drawing from it. It
had a good taste. I always found it was like a popcorn kind of taste.
Yeah, it did have a good taste. Anyway, so that's what I always thought of vaping. And then one day, I woke up brutally hungover. This is, in like 2012 or something. And I went out to my buddy's place. I was supposed to meet up with him. And I went into a coffee shop and I like wolfed down a breakfast burrito and like drank a coffee like really fast. And I was already kind of hungover. And then I went over to his place and went up to his apartment, and he had like kind of like like the first time I've ever seen one, like kind of one of those things.
A little a vape, you mean? Like
yeah,
a
like one of those things, right? And it was still a little bit bigger. It was like the size of like a cell phone.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Here, man, try this out. And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "Be careful, it's really strong." And it had this like Geiger counter thing where it like went from green to red, and when it was like red, it was like time to smoke. And I was just like kind of like smoking it, sitting on a couch for like 20 minutes. And all of a sudden he's like, "Oh fuck, whatever it is, it's 11 o'clock. I gotta go." And I was like, "Wait a minute, don't kick me out of your place, man. I can't fucking."
Oh, that sucks.
So then he had some meeting that I guess he had forgotten about, and then like here I am.
So he gave you the boot?
Gave me the boot, and I'm like sitting on the side of the road,
blitzed,
like, fucking delusional, man. Out of body experience, like full panic attack, like can't feel my face, like sweating.
Sounds like a sativa.
I don't even know what that means.
Really?
No, I'm serious.
I guess that's kind of modern, all that terminology.
Yeah.
Sativa is generally like
the more
uppy sort of.
The more hallucinogenic one, or
no, it's the one people associate with paranoia.
Yeah.
And a lot of the reason that people quit when they get older, they're like, oh, I keep getting paranoid.
This is full blown paranoia. This is like me thinking I was having a fucking aneurysm, and I'm sitting there on the curb. Middle of the day, like, not good for professional purposes,
Yeah.
I'm fucking sitting there, middle of the day, it's like an autumn day, and along comes randomly my cousin, who at the time I guess was living in the neighborhood, and he was like, "Hey Pete, what the fuck are you doing here?" And I like, look up at him, and I'm like, like, I can see myself from inside out, or I don't even know.
Crazy fucking...
And I had to like go lay on his floor for an hour, and then I don't know why, man. That was it. That was like the last straw. And like, here and there, if I'm drunk now, like, I try to do that as little as possible too. But I'll take a puff, and sometimes it feels good.
What about fucking with CBD? Because you can get flower where you can smoke, and we were talking about this last episode too, where it's like less than 1% THC.
I've tried that a little bit.
Yeah. Just you don't even really get high.
That's the thing, So like, I don't know.
It's supposed to be good for inflammation and
I'm sure,
anxiety and all that stuff.
I fed it to my friend who was sick with cancer and stuff because he was an older guy, never tried it, and I heard people have great experiences with it, so I bought him a box of pills. But
well, at the very least, I think it's more that you won't have a bad experience with it. That's what's really appealing to people. It's like, I'll try it because at the very least it'll be like, I didn't really feel anything.
I don't need it, man. I actually like the part that really fucks me up. I do. Like that's why I smoked weed. I didn't like weak weed when I was smoking weed, and sometimes I'll take a puff here and there now and actually come up with some really cool ideas. Not all of them are, the drill, but not all of them are as cool when you look back on them when you're sober.
Yeah.
But, I have had some really sort of eureka moments, even post fucking traumatic panic attack, that
something good came
out of it. When I've dabbled
it.
with it a little bit and had something good come out of it.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Uncanny Valley photo project was a product of that a little bit.
It was birthed from a joint session.
From a joint session.
That's amazing. I was going to say, I get sometimes if I'm drinking, I'll find texts to myself with like stupid joke ideas. And sometimes they're like, I can't even comprehend what the fuck. Because at the time you're like, oh yeah, these 2 words, that'll be enough to remember. No.
Yeah.
And the next day you're like, what? Lettuce shoes or some weird thing that was supposed to make
Goes
sense.
Nowhere.
No, I'm like, what the fuck? Who is this guy?
What's the comedy circuit like? Like, are you doing stand up every week or every day? Or like...
Every week I was pretty much rocking from last March until about this past November. I did a brewery show where we did an all musicians comedy thing, and since then I went pretty hard just focusing on this podcast and Christmas time, and I just got a little bit. put it on the back burner for a bit. But that's nothing new for me. It's just the first time since I started doing it more consistently that I've kind of taken a little bit of a hiatus.
Cool.
That's all I used to do back in the day was perform once every 6 months, and then I'd get that itch again. But I was like afraid to commit, and I still am, I guess, to some degree. But it's also just hard with 3 kids and all the other shit I usually have on the
I have a real job and stuff. And
yeah, I mean, I work part-time hours, or not even. I'm on call. I work around Kelly's schedule generally, and then we don't pay for daycare. I raise my son. I'm a
That's cool.
stay-at-home dad and a homemaker to some degree. I fucking vacuum. I bake pies and shit.
Cool. Yeah. From what I get from all my friends that have kids, they're like, I'm just completely naive to like how much childcare costs. People are like, yeah, my wife stopped working because she can work the whole year, and that doesn't even cover
it's not
the
worth
childcare
it
for the 2 kids. If we put them both in daycare, it's like having a $60,000 a year job. It's
exactly. It's
crazy.
We're just lucky in the sense that Kelly's a nurse, so she has a very not sporadic rather, but just a different schedule where she has big blocks of days off, and then I can jump on shifts when they call me during those days, and it works out.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I was fucking going with this, though, at the beginning. Shit.
Well, I was just asking you about your stand-up.
Oh, yeah, stand-up.
Yeah.
Sorry. I have a show on Tuesday, though.
Yeah.
It's all dads doing dad jokes. So
Oh, cool. Right.
Trying out a bunch of weird...
I'm back in Toronto. I'll be there 100% as a non-dad.
Hey, man, I think you still, I
get
laugh.
the jokes, yeah.
Shit. Okay, well, I want to get back to a couple more of your projects here that were just really interesting, man. The mugshot print campaign, this was like a little bit dark, but also it was very necessary from what I could gather. But it was, I don't know, I'll let you again kind of explain this one. But
Well, one thing I should explain, and I was naive to this too, before sort of starting to work in photography professionally. And I teach at Sheridan College. I teach photography. And one of the things I explain to my students is when I was in college or university, and I really wanted to get into photography, I just always assumed that when you go and you're, driving and you see a billboard for, I don't know, some new Nike thing that came out, I just assumed that like it was on the photographer to dream up this campaign and then go photograph it and then give it to Nike, and Nike's like, okay, cool, we're going to use it. Here's $100,000. See you later. Well, the way that most photography works, like the campaign that you're describing, it comes from an advertising agency that functions as an intermediary between the client, which in this case was an umbrella. It was under the umbrella of United Way. And then they come up with the advertising agency comes up with the concept, hires me as the vendor to go actually basically realize their idea. And so the idea there was...
So it's kind of like someone who writes a script, but then the director is 100%.
The one.
Okay.
And for the most part, almost all advertising campaigns that you see are like that.
Okay.
It's not necessarily, sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes it is the artist comes up with the concept and then it goes directly to the client. But I would argue that 99% of the time, the advertising agency comes up with the creative brief, and then they find an artist to realize that creative brief, be it an illustrator, a director, or a photographer, or whatever.
So you think that's good or bad, though?
I mean, it's just the way the world works.
The norm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what that was that there's a big problem, which is disgusting, but in Kenya and other parts of Africa, most pedophilia and rape that goes on happens within this sort of sphere of the family. So the uncle is a predator on the niece, and then or the grandfather's a predator on the granddaughter
Jesus.
or whatever, and that's how it happens because it's obviously way more difficult and there's way more stigma to like bringing these people to trial or to justice or whatever, if it's within the family. And furthermore, I think the laws were set up in a way where it was really difficult to do that, and there was actually change in the criminal code in Kenya that makes it easier to prosecute.
That's what the campaign was basically.
And that's what the campaign was about. So I guess you're going to be able to put this up.
Yeah, I'll show at least one of them so people get an idea.
It was an image of a family. Like
in case for people who are just listening,
So the idea was that it was like a family portrait. So you picture like, a mom, a father, a grandfather, and a daughter, standing for sort of family portrait style in front, in a village in Kenya, standing in front of a house. And the father has, superimposed like a mug shot over his face. And the tagline says, a father who raped a child, will now face jail. And then the subtext says, you know, like, thanks to, I think it was called 100 Girls Project, it's now easier to prosecute a rape that happens inside the
Yeah,
family.
it's obviously a positive development, but the first line makes you just go like, why was that not already a thing?
I know.
Like,
it's
what the fuck?
it's really fucked up. And I mean, look, I get the, you know, I'm really lucky that I get to, again, because it's not my idea, I get really lucky that I actually hopefully get to work on campaigns that sometimes can make a change. And they use those advertisements, and you know, they put them up in bus shelters and stuff in Kenya, and hopefully made a small change. And so that was a pretty
So
interesting
messed
thing
up though, because if that's the poster that then makes that person decide, oh well, I guess I'm not gonna rape my niece. It's like that fucked up person's still out there who was going to before that. So it's still such a dark thing to try to tackle. But
of course,
but
dude,
any
there's
move
so
in the right
much
direction,
fucked
you know?
up shit out there, man, and
Yeah.
like, you know,
especially in lesser developed countries where it's easier to get away
crazy.
with heinous shit like that.
Absolutely.
Damn.
Another big positive part of that campaign was that I got to go to Kenya, and even though it was for a pretty dark purpose, you know, I got to work, you know, in a completely different part of the world that I wouldn't have otherwise probably had the chance to see.
Well, and in this case, see how the other half lives, sort of, right?
There was a lot of that too. Like I got to, you know, I wasn't just in the big cities, but I got to go into some of these villages and stuff like that, and hang out and get drunk with these people and sort of see how they live and really get to know
See the
them on like,
customs and
yeah.
shit.
So
That's amazing. Yeah,
pretty
you
interesting.
sound like you've lived a very interesting life so far.
You know, if you sum it up in this format, it sounds a lot cooler than I actually am. You know, most of the time.
Still, when I'm saying Esquire, I see you smile. You should smile, man. That's the thing. I like to be able to be the guy to reiterate your achievements because if you don't already, or maybe you're sick of hearing them or you're used to it by now.
No.
Don't ever forget how special that is and how good your shit is, man.
Thanks.
You know?
I appreciate it, man. I do.
Oh, well, it won't just be me. Anyone who watches this, I'll put up your stuff, and I'm sure they're all going to go check it out in depth like I did.
That's great.
One thing I almost glossed over, which I'm so glad I'm not forgetting, the Uncanny Valley stuff, I was going to segue into the other Trump thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which we can't forget, which is you had bought an autograph of Donald Trump, I'm assuming around The Apprentice time, right?
Yeah, maybe it was right before I think he announced his run was when I bought it.
But he was still basically like a goofy...
He wasn't president yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind
This is a crazy story. I saw you on the news and...
Yeah, I kind of forget that happened. And even though it was, I don't know, 2019 or 2018. So what had happened was...
There's no way I'm not going to bring it up here, man.
Thanks. No, you know, so much, I think... and I mean, I don't want to like sound like I'm some like... I still feel like I have a lot. I feel like I'm just getting started. Even though I have had some success and I'm super fortunate about that, but I don't want to sound like I'm like speaking from some pulpit where I'm like, you know, the world famous artist that knows how the world works and anything like that. But
you're trying to stay grounded and
start
keep
stay
moving
grounded.
forward.
But so much I think of what I do, and this goes right back to that Point Blank project that I worked on with my buddy Derek. Is like I just want to see stuff that I think I would appreciate if I saw in a gallery wall or I saw in an apartment that I went to. And I had this idea that, you know, if I walked into a gallery, the National Gallery here in Ottawa, which I think is phenomenal, and I walked in there and there's all this beautiful art on the wall, and then in one room there was... You know, like on a big white wall, there was Trump's signature in a frame. I feel that everybody would just look at that like it's the Mona Lisa and be like, ugh.
Or have some sort of feeling about it.
Not everybody, because some people love Trump, and that's fine. But I don't, and most people that I surround myself with, you know, think that he's an awful person, and that's that signature that's on so much of that legislation, like, you know, to fucking, you know, lower taxes for the richest people in America, or
drone strikes
on a leader or whatever, all, you know, removing American troops from Syria or whatever. It's a
powerful signature.
It's a powerful signature, and it looks fucking crazy.
Why? It
looks like an EKG scan. That's it. Huh. I mean, check it out.
Yeah, I'll put it up. I don't remember it because I saw this a while ago.
It's as insane as Donald Trump is, and so I had this moment of like, it would be fucking weird to walk in here and see his signature just on the gallery wall. I wonder what his signature looks like holy shit, his signature looks just as more insane than I could have imagined. And
now I want to see it again.
And so I literally put it in a frame, and I framed it the way that I kind of envisioned it, which is like the classic white shadow box frame, which is sort of
very minimalist.
part and parcel with like modern art, like a lot of modern art's framed that way. And there was a show at the Only One Gallery that my friend Kais runs, which is a really sort of good gallery in Toronto right now that like breaks a lot of new work. And he was having this group show, and he said, "I'd really like you to contribute something to the show." And I said, "Okay, but it's a surprise. It's not a photograph. I'm going to contribute a sculpture." And he's like, "Yeah, man, love your work. Just whatever you want. Just come in and hang it up."
That's awesome.
So I brought it in there, and
Free
he's
reign.
like, put it up on the wall. It was kind of a mosaic of different pieces. And he's like, "This is really cool. This is not what I expected, but awesome." And he's like, "It's for the show, though. So how much do you want for this piece?" And I'm like, "Fuck, dude, I want it. It's not for sale."
Well, how much did you pay for the autograph?
Like $200 on eBay.
And when did you get that? It was
Like, I don't know, like before the election, like, or I think it was right when the run started. So like 2016, 2015.
But you got it when you had this idea for.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I sold it while he'd been president for like 2 or 3 years already. So I had it like in the run up to the election, you know, and then the actual election happened. Trump got elected, so it had even more sort of meaning. Then that's when I put it in the frame. Then my buddy was like, "Put it in the show," and I was like, he's like, "How much do you want for it?" And I was like, "Well, I want it. I don't want to sell it. I don't want to give it away. I'm still kind of pissed that I don't have it." So he came up with a number which I thought nobody would be crazy enough to pay, which I think was like $4,800 US or something like that. And I showed up to the opening, and it had a red dot next to it, which means something sold in a gallery. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Most people would be kind of happy, but
whatever. Like, of course, the joke worked, but I was just like, and I was like, "Man, are you serious?"
Good exposure too, because you got to go talk on the news and stuff about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of cool.
So it's not bad for your brand, is all I'm saying.
No. But it's a flash in the pan, man. All this shit. Like, I'm telling you, like, I almost forgot about that, and it was only like 2.5, or not even. Like, it was almost exactly 2 years ago, and it's like, yeah, of course, it was great. It's good for my brand. I got to go on the news. I got to get interviewed, and it was in the Globe and Mail, and it was on CTV and shit. But at the same time,
you don't have your signature anymore.
I don't have that thing, man.
Yeah, no, I get it. It holds more value to you than.
And it was real. That's the fucking cool thing about it. Like, you could literally see that, you know, and it's like, you know, the same sensation where you're like, you know, absolutely not what I'm saying is that Donald Trump's hand is the hand of God, but it sort of feels like this thing was like touched by that hand of, you know, super powerful evil wizard hand, like touch this cue card and put the signature on here, and
like some sort of transference. Because I understand.
You know, it's like if you got to touch, like, I don't know, Leonardo da Vinci's pube, and it's the real one. Here it is. You get and it's weird. You're feeling like, oh my god.
No, I get it, man. Dude, I'm a big nerd, so I've bought trading cards in the past where, like, nowadays the trading card sets, they put like relic pieces or whatever, where it's like a piece of material from somebody from the movie or whatever. And
you know what I'm saying? So
stuff like that.
It's that
or autographs.
There's
or whatever.
It's embarrassing that I don't actually remember what the word is for it, but it's the shit that, like, in medieval times they'd be like, oh, you know, this is the feather of an angel or whatever. And it's like,
or no, they said the fucking narwhal tusk was from a unicorn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's got that sort of magic to
Mysticism,
it.
sort of.
Mysticism. Anyway, it was kind of a joke again that
and someone ended up buying it.
But an Iranian guy ended up buying it.
Oh, crazy.
Taking it to Iran and selling it at an art auction there for, I don't know, even more. Yeah.
That's insane. Then you feel like you kind of got fucked over a bit.
Whatever. I mean, it's
no, finders keepers or whatever.
Exactly,
yeah. Well, I was gonna say I didn't know that part, but even if he hadn't done that, it's not the worst move, because Trump's signature may just keep going up in value depending on his popularity keeps rising, and he's also banking on you if you end up being, a superstar photographer and you keep on this rise that you're already clearly on. So from his standpoint, if you had the money, it wasn't the worst decision.
No, it was cool. I mean, it was an interesting transition from, like, okay, well, you know, now I'm a Dadaist sculptor, which also pissed people off like crazy, you know, that I called it a sculpture. And I was like, yeah, of course. I'm recontextualizing one object into something else. And I'm, you know, and so that was kind of...
It seems like a bit of a technicality, I guess.
A bit of a troll. I don't know. I like doing that stuff. Right now I'm working on a sculpture of male enhancement, over-the-counter male enhancement pills.
It's like Viagra or Cialis or whatever.
No, dude. Like, I guess you don't smoke anymore, but if you go into like a late, like in Europe they call them late night shops, but we call it a convenience store here, but not like a branded one. If you go to like, you know, a mom and pop convenience store,
like a Dépanneur or whatever in
like a
Quebec.
Dépanneur.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in Quebec, but in
They're usually
Toronto,
small and they seem like they're owned by
and they're
like,
completely independent.
Yeah,
Actually, the same ones that had those frames on them that I filled with the Uncanny Valley images, like those types of places. In Toronto, there's tons of them. I'm sure I've seen them in downtown Ottawa as well, but just these independent convenience stores that are like, you know, open till late. Right where the guy stands, where all like the, like, you know, secret compartments where they hide the cigarettes are, they'll have these pills that look like it almost looks like kids' toys, and they're called like the most insane fucking names, like Alien Power 3000.
Really?
Yeah, and it's like,
Are they real? Do they work or something?
I
or
haven't
is it just
tried.
a
I haven't
scam?
tried any, but apparently, but apparently they kind of. I mean, apparently they have. They're not. They're gray market because they have a lot of them have tested positive for the active ingredient in like Cialis, Viagra, or both, or all three mixed with like
Oh, so it could
B
be very
vitamin,
unsafe,
or
probably.
you know, whatever, fucking pills, you know, mixed in with all kinds of weird extracts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're the branding on them is insane. Like they're holograms. There's ones with like 3-dimensional like
Glitter.
glowing unicorns, and they come in like almost like these like miniature GI Joe packages, and the pills got this like thing you twist open. Really fucking weird. They all say like made in America or made in Canada, and they're clearly not. They're made in China.
So who buys that and puts it in their body is what I'm
Well,
wondering.
so I started going out and collecting them because the English on them is really insane too. It's, you know, it says stuff like rock hard power 7-day maximum.
It's like when they do bootleg DVD covers and shit. They're
Yeah,
all
it's just the English on them is insane. Like
starring
it's,
Nicolas Rage or something
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
like all types of typos, all kinds of like sort of bad grammar, and they're really funny because it's, you know, they're talking about like rock hard erection last long days 7, or it's shit like that. And and they're all called like Black Panther, White Panther, Glowing White Panther, Alien Power. Like there's just,
Well, that's a big thing with the Asian, because I was going to bring up as sort of a sidebar. Isn't it like a big Asian culture thing to eat like tiger penis and like all these other things for virility?
I actually just shot an interesting public service announcement campaign having to do with exactly that I can't talk too much about. But yeah,
Okay, like
it is a big
poaching
thing
for
and it's a
those
big
reasons and
problem.
stuff, yeah.
They're like you know, like melting endangered dolphins into like dick pills basically in Asia, which is horrible.
And it was like same thing with shark fin soup and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Endangered sharks. And
Yeah, there's a lot of aphrodisiac based on endangered species.
Rhinoceros horns.
Rhinoceros horns.
Pangolin scales, the keratin scales off the pangolin. There's hardly that many of them left. You know?
What is wrong with humans in that sense? Like that we just eviscerate species for the stupidest reasons too.
Man, I don't know. I was listening. This is again a sidebar, but I was listening. I went and had a coffee this morning with my buddy, and he's telling me about, you know, Easter Island,
Yeah.
the one with the
big heads.
the big heads. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it's famous for.
Yeah.
But apparently, not that long ago, it was discovered by the Polynesians, and like, you know, within the last 1,000 years, and it was like this absolute utopia
Paradise,
of natural beauty. They had like thousands of different bird species, thousands of different, you know, aquatic species, dolphins, shellfish, and they found this place and they settled there. And because the resources were so abundant, and it's not a big place. I think it's like 6 miles by 4 miles or something like that. It's a pretty tiny
Yeah, it's supposed to
island.
be small. Yeah.
Yeah, and the population ballooned in like, you know, 100 years to like 20 or 30,000, and they just turned it into a desert, erected these big stone heads, and by the time I think the Spanish found them, they were eating each other, and the population had gone down to like a few hundred because they just exploited all the resources to nothing.
Cut all the trees down.
Cut all the trees down. Yeah.
They didn't think
it's just
about
a
any
micro,
sort of long term.
you know, in my opinion, it's just such a
Crazy.
nice bow-tied sort of metaphor for what we're doing with the Earth as a
Worst
whole.
case scenario. Well, that too, yeah. I was going to say, I wasn't going to bring this up because I didn't think it would ever tie into anything we were talking about, but I was talking to someone today about one of my favorite animals that's purportedly extinct, but I don't know if you know the thylacine.
No.
It's also known as the Tasmanian tiger, although it's in no way related to felines.
Okay.
It looks kind of more like a canine type thing. It's on all fours, a wolf type feature.
I know what you're talking about.
Gigantic mouth.
Yep.
And it's got tiger stripes near the back.
Yep.
It's actually a marsupial because it has a pouch, and very amazing animal. And we had footage of them up to like the 30s when the last one was in the zoo in black and white, no sound. But Just a fascinating animal, and we killed them originally because I believe their span was from Guinea or New Guinea, whichever it is. I'm not super...
Papua New Guinea?
Whichever one's near Australia and Tasmania. Yeah, so it spanned all three of those, and eventually, I think the last place it was Tasmania that they said the last one was at the zoo there. But when they first came, the explorers or everybody that moved down to that part of the world, they were eating all the chickens and all their livestock and stuff, so they became known as like a pest, and they were being hunted also for their pelts, and just the same kind of thing where no one stopped at a certain point and said like, whoa, 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 until there was like 3 left, and then they had only males or some shit like that, and they couldn't.
Yeah, it would be a fascinating series for someone to do, and I'm really fascinated with animals that have been extinct in like in like modern history. You know, in
to
the
be
last,
captured
like,
on film.
Or not, maybe even a little bit before that, but like call it like.
The dodo
Since
bird.
the expansion of Europe to basically take over the world, whenever that was, like, called in the last like 600 years or 400 years, I'd love to see a sort of concise series about, okay, here's the Yangtze River dolphin, here's the Tasmanian, tiger or whatever.
Yeah.
And also, it'd be good.
Thylacine.
You should get a thylacine pelt and hang it here next to a narwhal tusk.
Yeah, I'm sure they're cheap to come by.
But
I'll call my thylacine guy.
but it would be a cool series, like just to, to see like what else? I mean, I know the dodo.
The dodo.
Pardon me?
The
Passenger pigeon, yeah.
Wasn't the American bison, they killed like so many of them that they had piles of skulls and...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're still around, though. But the passenger pigeon used to blacken the sky.
That's right.
When they took off.
Yeah.
You just pointed a shotgun up and like 5 of them would fall.
Yeah.
Right? And they're extinct.
Yeah.
No, the population was in the billions.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Passenger pigeon. Damn.
Like, and relatively recently. Like, they were like around until like the
Early 1900s.
yeah.
Well, okay, so to carry on, if I will, or if I can, rather, with the thylacine thing that I find really interesting is there's a lot of people that still think they might be out there.
Huh. Like Bigfoot a little bit.
Kind of, yeah. Because I think there's areas that are pretty deep bush and stuff like that where they could, and there's, if you go on YouTube, there's videos of supposed thylacines, and there are traits that, because they had a very long and very rigid like tail that was just straight like a stick, and it would kind of just move like that while they were running, and they're just a very distinct way of moving that some of the clips I've seen, even I've been like, damn, is that? But but then you're like, well, why are they always far away and grainy? The same arguments you have for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
But if there's not a lot of them and they're somewhat reclusive because they all got killed by humans, then that would maybe explain it, but Ted, who's the guy, Ted Turner or Ted Koppel? It's one of those. Ted Koppel was a reporter. Ted Turner.
Ted Turner's the guy who started CNN.
Yeah.
It's probably him. He had something in the 80s where he actually put like $1 million on the line if anyone could find and capture one, dead or alive, and nobody ever got it. But to this day, people still
out there looking. I mean, hopefully they're still out there. But I mean, there's no. We're not in short supply of animals that are about to go extinct.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Extinct.
More and more. I think I'm just drawn to that, like almost like the Bigfoot, that mystery of. The magic of it a little bit. Like,
I'll tell you what, when I was in Kenya on that project, that mugshot project we were talking about, I got to see a rhinoceros in its natural environment.
Crazy.
As an aside, they'd cut off its horn, but they did it especially so nobody would want to poach it, which is super sad.
Yeah.
So they preemptively cut off its
They made it unappealing.
Horn, unappealing to poachers. But I was watching that thing move around, man, and just like it had this like weird like cushiony kind of paw, like its giant foot. Like I was like, I don't know. It looks like it's from a different time.
Yeah.
Well,
like, it kind of is. They're
yeah,
ancient,
but you're looking at this thing, and it doesn't look like it's from our world anymore.
Rhinos are fucking nuts. They look like they've got armor plating, which I guess they kind of
Yeah.
do, but they look like little tanks or something. Like
very, very weird and cool, but definitely felt like, and they were explaining to me, I'm so dumb. I don't know if it was a white rhino or a black rhino, but it was like one of like fucking 50 left in the world or something
Good
like
Lord.
that, man. But I was watching it and I'm
sad.
like, it's sad, but like this thing almost doesn't belong in this world anymore. There's no room for these creatures. We've just taken it all over and paved it over, and
I know what you mean. Like they don't have enough time to adapt.
Yeah.
These types of evolutionary adaptations, take
Millions of
thousands,
years,
millions of years, and here we are just changing everything in like a century.
In a century,
to the point where it's almost unrecognizable.
I know.
It's
It's really easy to get depressed about.
the same thing with technology. Just things, the speed at which everything seems to be going is just not slowing down.
I just wish that like with this sort of poisoning we're doing with ourselves that's happened in the last 10 years where like every single person basically is addicted to social media. I wish okay, they figured that out, maybe partially by accident, but like give us something, give us give us a cure for cancer at least, or like, you know what I mean? Like you did that, you're poisoning the kids with social media, and every kid wants to get plastic surgery now. Like
we need a win.
Yeah, give us one. Yeah, I don't know. Like
didn't they cure AIDS kind of?
Or stop burning coal. Like actually figure out a way. Like you're smart enough to figure that out. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Or you watch.
Those should be of paramount importance. Those types of issues should be all that anyone cares about. Like stopping fucking up the world, finding a renewable source of energy, getting to a point where everyone on the planet is like in relatively the same shape. We all have like food and water and the ability to like prosper to some degree.
Unless there's somebody, for sure. I know what you mean. Unless there's a reason why. There's conflict in a place and they're purposely starving a population, there is no more starvation.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there's not like shit, we just don't have enough food. If there's a place in the world where it's not getting any food, it's because somebody else is trying to fuck them over by stopping the food from getting there.
Yeah.
It's true. We kind of did, I don't know if it's through GMO or through just the cultivation, the technology and cultivation, but it's true. Like we kind of can produce enough food that the people shouldn't be going hungry.
It seems like one of those problems we should have tackled a while ago, but it's right. It's so much more layered than that. It's not just about the food. It's about getting it there and keeping it. It's more about the places.
Guys, it's about making money.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I
guess I hate that in 2020 we still have billionaires and then we have people that are like born into complete and absolute bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, without drifting off into this, like, I know what you mean. I was just reading an article right before I came over here about like the disparity in wealth in the States and stuff like that. And there's like this organization that formed called like Patriotic Millionaires or Compassionate Millionaires, and it's basically like a group of like a few thousand people making $1 million a year or more who got together and said, okay, guys, you got to tax us more. Like they actually. The lady at the head of it was one of the descendants of Disney, and she's basically gave up her private jet and gave up her castle in Ireland and said like, listen, there's people that work at Disney getting paid under $15 an hour, sleeping in their cars, and here we are, flying around in private jets and just everything. And she actually felt so gross about it that she's trying to make a change. But yeah, I mean, that's obviously a topic we could.
Yeah. Well, we're already way down tangent alley, but that's fine. We've done lots of photography talk already too, which is, this is one of these things where I was having a discussion with my friend the other day because he had listened to some of my episodes and he said sort of that he prefers when things kind of come back to the focus. And I think that's, I explained to him, I think that's there's a point to that, but that's also an opinion thing. Like I listen to tons of podcasts that are all over the fucking place.
Yeah, me too.
And I enjoy that too. So it really depends what you're into, I guess.
What was the first podcast that like really got you hooked?
Honest to God, man, and I'm not just saying this to sound like cheesy or whatever, but from the second we started, like I was hooked. From the second we started designing this place and like working on.
Wait, I'm saying which one inspired you.
Oh, you mean ones that I listened to?
Yeah,
I thought you meant from doing these.
That's almost a better question. But
well, I'll finish that off. I guess that just even when we were building this podcast studio, it was something about putting the work in first of all and watching it slowly and being like, hey, it's just me, and Kelly helped out a lot, obviously. But there was a lot of nights where I came down here and just cracked a beer and just painted like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
And
it's fun, building an environment and like.
Yeah, and then being like, this is my little sanctuary now. Yeah. And then, people come by and do these interviews and then they leave a little something on the wall and a little snippet of everybody's energy kind of gets culminated into this like sphere of just, I hope, positive podcasting energy or whatever,
Yeah.
As for podcasts that I got into, honestly, like I listened to Rogan a lot, but that was not the first. Probably something by Kevin Smith.
And
he was all the Smodcast stuff. He had a bunch of them, but I was a big Kevin Smith. I am still a big Kevin Smith fan. And then Rogan for sure. Pete Holmes, you made it weird. He's a comedian. I don't know if you're.
I don't know Pete Holmes. No.
Look him up, man. I'm telling you.
Cool.
So good. But yeah, man, it's just been such a great experience, and I think podcasting has so much to offer to anyone.
I'm hooked on it, man. I listen to podcasts when I'm in the car all the time.
But if you can do your own too, I'm telling you, man. Like I know that's what Rogan tells everyone. Like
you know what though? Like I've got this thing where in like 2010. I really wanted to do it. I had an idea, and I know a lot of weird people in Toronto that I'm.
You would have been ahead of the curve.
I know, and so because I didn't do it, I'm so mad at myself that I'm just like fuck it. That's one thing that
No, man.
You know,
Pick it up. No, because I was kind of the same way. I wanted to say that when I was listening to those Kevin Smith podcasts and stuff, I always thought, hey, like maybe I could do this.
Yeah.
But it's a lot to commit to and picking a room and designing stuff.
it's also so nice just to have a conversation like this. You know what I mean?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's, I think, why I'm enjoying it so much is just you put the fucking phone down, you connect with somebody face to face. I love just learning stuff. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's just been all winning all around, you know. And then me and my dad have talked about this before, but we're spending time together.
That's super cool, man. I mean, in watching my parents get older, I just think that's such a rad way to, you know, to do a project like that with a parent. It's fucking.
Yeah, it kind of just happened, really. But because you were my dad, I'm looking at now in case you're just listening, but you were just kind of supposed to fill in or whatever. Like I was supposed to be finding a guy, but then we did a couple, and then I think you enjoyed them, and we just kind of kept going. And it's been really great.
I think they're super interesting. I love listening to all the conversations, and everybody brings like their own unique stuff, and it's and most of them have been young people too, and I'm a bit blown away by just how much they have to offer. You know?
Yeah. Well, I try to find interesting guests. I mean, I'm in no way an elitist either. I also think that it's great to have someone on who's maybe just starting out or, you know, because I can relate to that too. Look, we've got 70-something subscribers as of this episode. So I totally can relate to that. And it's just, and anyone who wants to come and hang out, just chill.
Well, I mean, I listened to a recent podcast with Theo Vaughn.
And he's hilarious.
He's great. And he just had his friend on who's like a plumber.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the most interesting ones that I've heard. And he had people call in and ask plumbing questions. And I actually fucking learned so much. And I found it way more interesting than some, you know, when he has like some A-list comedian on even, you know. And
those can be good too. But I get the point you're making. It's something you weren't expecting to find.
And it was great. Like, but let me finish telling you about the dick pills before I forget.
Yes, please. Oh, good Lord. Sorry. Now I feel like you've been holding that the whole time.
No. I just want to finish that.
Let's get back to the crazy.
Because this is kind of, I don't. Who knows if this is going to go anywhere? But I think like it was one of those. It's another one of those like things where it's kind of a eureka moment where I'm like, this is so weird. It's illegal. It's kind of drugs, and it's marketed in such a crazy way because it's so primal. It's like, how are we going to get the attention of a drunk guy who's buying condoms or smokes at a late night convenience shop, probably like half in the bag at 3 a.m. So they've got these like radiating packaging, you know, and
going to get your attention. No matter
what. I've amassed like, 50 of them, and I want to like, tile them and display it as a sculpture. And again, in the same, that's why I started talking about it, is because the Donald Trump signature thing. And it's also a Dadaist sculpture in its most, in its essence, because I'm taking.
So what does that mean? Sorry, I'm not familiar with the term.
There's a guy named Marcel Duchamp, and this is in the early 1900s. He's an artist, and it was at a time in France in the artist in art. It was called the Salon era, and what that meant was that you'd go into a salon and there'd be sort of like this, like a mosaic of different paintings displayed that were for sale, and you'd go in there and buy them, and they're like stuff you'd want to decorate your house with at the time. So like, flowers and, still lifes and paintings of, nudes and whatever.
Pretty things, yeah.
And he was, in my opinion, a genius. And what he did was he came in there and he took a urinal from a bathroom, turned it upside down, called it a fountain, and signed it and said, this is my sculpture. And everyone was like, "What the fuck? No. This is insane. You can't. This is not a sculpture. This is a toilet." And he's like, why not? Like, this is a fountain now. It's turned upside down, and
I've repurposed
it, and that's sort of I guess a very crude explanation of what Dadaist art is that recontextualization is that basically anything can be art in the correct context, and
it almost sounds like when you tell that story like a guy who's just being a dick.
Kind of.
He's like, oh yeah, that's art. Well, so is this.
But because he sort of pioneered the idea, I think personally, I think he's a genius.
I think outside the box is a good. Yeah.
And so and there's the idea in art history of the ready-made, which means exactly that. Like it's already been hatched. So I go by a Campbell's soup can, and then I put it on a plinth in a gallery, on a white plinth, and now it's a sculpture, you know, and it's the idea of the ready-made. And that's sort of, you know, in sort of joking about the Trump signature of the dick pills, or not even really joking. I'm saying, well, here's the sculpture, here's the ready-made. When it says, you know, when you go into a gallery and it says, you know, materials, and if it's a sculpture, it'll say like acrylic paint, aluminum, whatever, plaster, or if you see a photograph, it'll say like, you know, printed on archival pigment paint, you know. So I'm going to literally take all the fucked up crazy ingredients that are listed on the back of those pills, and there's gonna be like,
they're gonna have to write it all out.
I'm gonna write it all out, and I'm gonna say, okay, here's it's, you know, they're all tiled in a frame, and it's gonna be like material. It's gonna say glass, wood, you know, foam core, cardboard, and then list all the crazy ingredients that are in there.
Like the longest list they probably ever
longest list ever, and then I'm gonna, you know, hang it up on a wall in a gallery and probably piss some people off or whatever. But I think I want to. I'll show you before I leave today.
I was going to say, I really want to see these things now. It's hard to picture.
It's wild, man.
And are they like really distinct? Like while they all carry these flashy motifs, are they distinct?
They all have their own personality, and like
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, they're cool. And there's kind of the ones that are more targeted for like, you know, the businessman, and then there's the ones that are more wild, like the more like psychedelic ones and stuff.
Trying to get a man of every sort of walk of life. Yeah.
There's even one that's made for girls called Lucky Lady.
Oh, I can't wait to see these.
So that's something I'm kind of working on in the background a little bit.
I wanted to bring up one thing about photography. It was kind of my one photography comment that I wanted to discuss with you that wasn't directly related to your work, which is that photography is very unique in the sense that it's art. It can be artistic to like a crazy degree, but it can also be extremely just practical. You know, you take a picture because you need a picture of something. And I don't know, like, I was trying to honestly think of other things that can be applied the same way, you know? I guess you could say that about music, like making a stupid jingle for a commercial or whatever, but I don't know. Like, do you ever, like, okay, I guess I should rephrase that. Do you, so it's a question instead of just a random open comment, but do you ever find yourself, since you're obviously an artistic eye, do you find, like, you can ever shut that off if you just want to take a casual picture at a barbecue or something? Or are you always going to be, like, looking for the best lighting, and you can't really...
I don't know. I mean, listen, here's the thing. Not to get overly annoying and academic, but there is something in semiotics, which is the study of signs, which is called indexing. And basically, if you think about indexing, it's literally, that's why it's called your index finger, because I'm saying that arcade machine or this microphone or that's your dad.
An identifier.
So in indexing, and so you take that into photography, and photography is the process of indexing. This is that. Even though I take a photo of this phone, it's not this phone, but it's this phone. It's the same reason that you find it hard to rip up a picture of your mom. It's not your mom. It's a photograph of your mom. But it feels wrong. But it feels wrong, right? So the inherent practice of photography is you are just indexing your environment or your surroundings.
Yeah, cataloging life.
And right to the most practical thing, which is like every single item on Amazon that's ever been sold needs to have a photograph taken of it. It needs to be indexed. And I mean, I take a pretty blue collar approach to photography, and I always have. Like, I want to be a working photographer. I don't want to be somebody who, only uses it for my artistic endeavors. Like, I want to be able to live a comfortable life from photography. And in that process, I'm going to have to take photos for clients that serve a purpose that is not necessarily artistic. More and more so, I'm lucky enough that the projects that I am hired to shoot go beyond simply indexing a product.
Things you believe in, and
or interesting, creative, more cerebral stuff. But of course, in working, you get hired to shoot products, and it really
it's going to pay the bills.
It's got to pay the bill, and it doesn't go beyond. They just want their lighter that they're selling on a white background, and they want it to look as good as possible and not have too much glare and look appealing, and that's it. And I've done work like that too, and so you kind of divorce. Sometimes you have to divorce the fact that I'm a professional photographer, meaning I'm getting paid to use my camera, from I'm also, I think, interested in using photography for my own artistic endeavors or whatever. So you can sort of turn it off. It's not always nice to do that, and it starts to sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes you do get that sort of like, fuck, it's a job.
I think that happens with like any
everything.
creative things specifically. Like you can be really in love with being an actor, but when it's the 20th take and you've been on set for 11 hours, I'm sure you're like, okay,
yeah,
I'm over being an actor at this exact moment, you know?
And I try my hardest not to be a spoiled baby and like still tell myself like, look, man, like, you know, 15, maybe not 15, but 20 years ago, if, you know, you wanted this so bad, you know, if I could tell you that you're going to get paid to use your camera in a profession, like I'd be so happy. It doesn't matter what I'm shooting.
Mm-hmm.
But slowly I do try to cut the fat and really embrace working on stuff that actually excites me as much as possible. Like for years I supported myself by shooting weddings. At first I was like, even though it's not like I'm fascinated by weddings, but I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm the guy that gets to photograph one of the most important.
Yeah, these people are trusting me.
People are trusting me to shoot them kissing, walking down the aisle on one of the most important days of their life.
Yeah, just momentous.
I'm going to make this look amazing. And as it slowly seeps into being a job, I started to hate it because I'm not passionate about weddings. I'm not a guy that gets excited about the floral arrangement or what shoes the bride's wearing or whatever, what top hat the guy's got on. And it's slowly turned into this thing where I dreaded it. And I eventually was lucky enough that I'm like, fuck it, I'm cutting it off. I'm not going to do this anymore because it's actually a pain in the ass and it's making me feel miserable. So I'm going to stop. And I think that's
empowering.
Yeah. But I guess that's a really long answer to your question. But yeah, sometimes you definitely have to divorce the fact that, you know, this is not a creative thing right now. This is just.
Well, it's nice that you're able to keep moving to new projects. You know, like a lot of other art forms. I've thought about this before, too, because I've played music before. I've been in a couple little bands. But I don't know that if I was given the opportunity to be in a band and really commit, that I would want to do it. Because I've thought about how, like, if you're a big band, you can put out new albums. You can keep trying to interject new material to keep it fresh for you. But you're still going to be playing fucking whatever the song, insert song here, you know, your greatest hits. And like, God, when you've played it for the 40,000th time, do you not just want to like smash your guitar?
I wonder about that a lot. I don't know. You know, you're AC/DC and you're playing Thunderstruck.
That's exactly what I'm saying, you know?
Like, I mean, what's that? But maybe not, man. Maybe, you know,
maybe when there's a million gajillion fans screaming in your face.
I'm always weirded out by, you know, you take a band like the Rolling Stones and they've actually been pretty prolific about putting out new music.
That's true.
Not that we give a shit about it, you know? And so you're out there and the songs that make the stadium ignite are songs that you wrote when you're in your late teens, early 20s. And here you are, you know,
40 years ago or whatever.
Late 70s or whatever the hell they are now. And those are the songs that people want to hear. So I don't know. I don't know if it would be draining. I don't know if I'd feel like, you know, you kind of like some kind of like hired monkey that they cart out to like do a dance and then, you know, so I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it's just the numbers is what blows my mind. Because I go like, oh yeah, 5 times, 6 times. But when you're talking like the 1,000th time or God knows, probably even more than that, they played Satisfaction or whatever, you know? How many times do you think they've honestly played that song? It's
crazy.
It's insane.
I don't know. But on the other hand, maybe not, man. Maybe like, you know, you got 500,000 screaming fans. I don't know. Maybe
and we're not them. That's exactly kind of what it comes down to. Is like maybe when you find the thing that you really is for you, then that doesn't happen, you know. And it seems to be like that for you with photography and being able to jump around between your different projects. And
yeah, I like it a lot, man. Like it's still it hasn't gotten old yet, you know. And I still get, you know, butterflies in my stomach when I get an email come in and like, hey, it's like a request a quote for like, you know, some client that I, you know, 10 years ago could have only dreamed about even knowing who I am or whatever. I still have that on the commercial side. And then on the creative side, I still, you know, have those moments where I'm like, you know, like when I shot the Uncanny Valley thing where like, I'm like, I think this is going to work. I think this is going to look cool. And then, you know, we're in Madame Tussauds at like 7 a.m. before they open, and we take the first photo, and it pops up in the screen, and it's like even better than what I thought. I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be, and you know, and that's the best feeling.
Yeah. actualizing
that I can describe. It's just like, holy shit, I actually thought of it and it worked. You know?
Yeah, man. It definitely worked.
Yeah, thanks.
I guess we're getting there. I don't know that I have too many specific things. Well, actually, while we're on photography, one more thing I wanted to ask you is, do you do digital and old school? Like, do you do black, or what's it called, darkroom
Analog?
stuff?
Well, I learned on analog. I learned on 35 millimeter, which I kind of feel like, just like you, we're a part of this very strange group of people that there's actually a word for, which I can't remember. It's like 79 to 84 or something, where we literally had an upbringing that was completely free from...
Oh, you're talking about the years we were born?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm 85, but same difference.
Same difference. Yeah. So we're actually part of that generation that like had it both ways. Like we had... I
know exactly what you're saying. I've described this before as...
There's a word for it, though.
Is there?
I can't remember what it is. But basically what it means is like we had an upbringing that was like both no internet and internet.
That's what I was going to say. I always say we hit puberty at the same time that the internet did.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I felt about that exact transition between analog photography to digital photography. Where like I was one of the kids that was still running around to 1 hour photo labs as they were sort of closing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like I watched that.
Keeping it old school.
I watched that transition sort of unfold just as I was getting into photography.
I used to work in a photo lab, so
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Oh, I like Shoppers Drug Mart just for God.
That's a real lab though, man. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah. I had to pour all the chemicals and shit.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. Other than the guy that ran the place was a fucking good lord, one of the worst bosses I've ever had in my life. Just like a scum.
What other shit jobs did you do? I worked at McDonald's.
I generally liked most of my, or found things. I worked at Rogers Video, and
that's a cool one.
Yeah, working in a movie store was pretty cool. We got free rentals, and I was a pretty bad employee. Because there was late charges and shit, right? But once you start working there,
did you work at the one at the plaza by the beer store?
Yeah, that's like no longer there. Yeah. Which is why I don't really feel bad about saying
that's the one that I grew up going to.
Yeah, so you probably saw me there at some point, maybe.
Probably.
I don't know if the times lined up, but. Yeah, it was, we had late charges and stuff, and after working there for a bit, you realize that the whole late charge system was, like, it didn't affect the actual budget. It wasn't actually in the budget. It was just something we were supposed to enforce. But you could just as easily, like, delete it.
And nobody cares.
Or you might get bitched at or whatever, but there was a lot of times where we were allowed to delete it if it was to help sell a combo coupon book or whatever. So eventually I just started realizing I could, like, make deals with people. And, like, I got a guy to buy me a case of beer once because he had, like, a $50 late charge.
That's pretty cool.
Buy me a 6-pack or whatever it is for, like, 15 or whatever, and I'll get rid of your late charge. And
wow.
Yeah, I was a little crafty little manipulator.
Yeah, but that goes to the same point, man, is that, you're at the tail end of anybody in the world is ever going to have that experience.
Yeah.
Like
renting movies.
There's a 30-year run of where like video rental like existed in time, and you were at the very tail end of that, right? Like 5 years after you probably stopped working there, that store is out of business, doesn't exist anymore.
Well, and I started cherishing that time period more and more with the development of smartphones and just what's been happening. I feel like when I'm part of it's just childhood nostalgia, I bet, but something about the simplicity of things back then, it really does make you go. I would even rather go further. I'd like to like live in the 60s for a bit, or the 70s, where you have microwaves just came out, or like whatever,
or color television or whatever.
But you got the basic things you need still. If anything, not so many goddamn distractions. You know?
So what are we gonna say now? Like in 20 years, like, oh, I remember that. That was the Facebook era. Oh, I remember that. That was the MySpace era. That was the Instagram era. That's what it's gonna be.
But do you think, like, are you implying that social media is gonna like die out?
Well, it changed. Like,
it'll change.
I got into social media when it was MySpace.
Yeah.
And it was huge, and that's how bands promoted. And
I had one.
But there was that like 4-year window where it was the biggest thing in the world. It was, at
Tom
the time,
was everybody's friend or whatever.
Yeah. And then that literally disappeared and got eaten by Facebook. And now Facebook's for like our parents, pretty much, And
everybody hates Mark Zuckerberg now.
But everyone's just like now Instagram, but now it's TikTok, and like it's sort of it changes.
My kids are obsessed with TikTok.
So, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like your kids aren't going to probably grow up. I would be surprised if your kids will even have Facebook.
Well, TikTok's a perfect example because if we go back like 10 years or even less, it was Vine, which was the exact same thing pretty much from what I know of TikTok. They're just these short, like 1 minute or less. I think Vines were like 12 seconds or something.
Yes.
I hope I'm living in a cabin in the woods by the time that the lifespan of social media causes the collective psyche of the human
social
brain
media,
to fail.
what's going to happen first, all this, or just like the environment and the world falling apart? Which already...
I think we got like another 100 years on the environment. Who knows, man? Like, I don't know. Every generation thinks the world is ending too.
It's true.
Right?
But it does seem like there's a lot of weird nature shit happening even in the last 10 years. I don't know, in my opinion, but I'm also not like a meteorologist.
Okay, so listen to this. We had the ice storm in what, 1998?
Yes, 97 or 98.
Sure, right? That felt like the world is ending. There hasn't been anything as bad since.
Oh, I didn't mean here specifically. I meant like stuff you see around the world, like more wildfires than I remember hearing about when we were kids. And
ultimately,
shit like that.
I know it's true, but
Yeah.
I do think that, like, I think also just the same way every generation thinks the world is ending, every generation, I think, talks about how the weather is getting more and more weird. Like my dad says he remembers, the winters were like this when we first moved here, which was like in the early 80s.
I get the point you're saying.
Though, yeah. So anyway.
It might be subjective to a degree, like it happens to everyone, sort of thing. Yeah.
And if we go through a really, really cold winter, which I kind of feel like we just did, like this is the first mild winter that I feel. This is a fucking horrible podcast. We're talking about the weather now.
Yeah.
Like losers.
Shit, man. I was gonna say we never even mentioned this, but you're like a super sport because yesterday the weather was complete balls for driving, so we postponed. We were supposed to record this, and this is actually our first really late night podcast.
Yeah, what time is it? We're at.
I was gonna say, is that the fucking accurate time? Because that's insane.
I'm supposed to go to the gym with Jeff Townsend at 9 a.m.
It's almost 2 o'clock. So yeah.
Cool, man.
Shit. Okay. Well, we got to ask you at least the superpower question. I don't know if you've watched our episodes to the end.
Tell me.
I don't think a lot of people do. I think that's because all the guests come in, and I'm expecting like who's gonna have one already in the bank, and everyone gets caught off
this is
guard.
gonna be improv for sure.
Yeah. So if you could have any super ability, like a superhuman power, I'm not talking about like a character, but what would it be and why? And flying is like vetoed because it's just such an obvious.
The obvious one.
Yeah. I don't know.
I would love to be able, and I've always thought about this. And I swear to God, this is pure improv. So if you guys think this is a good one,
no,
cool.
First reaction is always the best.
Yeah, no, I would love to like be able to switch, and I'm inside your flesh bot, and I'm seeing the world through your eyes, feeling it through, like
being John Malkovich.
I guess so, but
kind of.
But like, how different is it the way you smell stuff and taste stuff from me? Do you know what I'm saying?
Interesting.
Like, I'd love to
So it's like not psychic, but telepathic ability to
sort
a degree.
of, but like to be able to I guess it's like being John Malkovich, but more than that. Like how's the way that I experience spicy food versus the way your dad tastes like.
So is this just something you're experiencing, or are you actually going into the person's body?
I guess you're experiencing it all encompassing the way that they would. You know what I mean? Like what's 100 year?
So it's not a possession thing.
No.
Okay, because I was gonna say what happens to your body when you're in their body. But
I don't know. Maybe it's just like in like a meditative state or something. But
interesting.
Yeah, but I'd like to be able to what does it look like? What does the world look like to somebody who's colorblind?
If everyone had that power, the world would be so much more peaceful.
Probably.
You know what I mean?
A lot more empathy.
He gets a prize for innovation, man. That's the best one anyone's come up with.
That sounds like you did plan it, but I believe you that you didn't. Yeah,
but I've actually thought about that, so it's not.
Like,
yeah, there you
we all
go.
see the same color blue when we look at this.
Yeah.
Like,
it's been a great podcast though. Either way, man, thank you so much for coming. Welcome back anytime.
My pleasure. Can I show off the gift?
Yeah, I was gonna say if you have something for the wall, sometimes we do it after. But if you wanted to show it off,
so
by all means.
This might extend the podcast by a couple minutes. I hope that's cool.
Yeah, that's totally cool.
So I brought a duffel bag of shit because me and my buddy Derek, we've been working on, and this is kind of a joke, and I don't know what to do about this idea, but we've kind of become obsessed with like sort of mid-century or like nostalgic emblems that are like sort of that bring us back to our childhood, like the way that we remember sort of Canada being. So like we made these shirts that are not real, but we made like an official like Foodland Ontario, like an official Foodland Ontario shirt, and they're imagined, and we like imagined the roles for these. So this is the one that like the guy at the food stall wears that like hands out the the strawberries or whatever, and then there's like. I'll just show a couple of these.
Yeah,
but like,
for sure. That's hilarious.
This is like the official on like a National Park of Canada gate greeter shirt. So this is like the old logo of the Parks Canada.
Yeah.
So this is like the one that like of course, this is not true, but this is the one that the gate greeter would wear in like 1977 or something like that. Because the logos are just so awesome. So
that's awesome.
So I thought maybe I'd like, this is a big old Ontario logo. I thought I'd give you the sweatshirt.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much.
For sure, man.
I'll rep Ontario for sure.
Because
yours to discover.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I just like.
I'm so comfy too.
I'm so stoked about the way those. The way that those logos look.
Oh, you got it on your hat too.
Yeah, I got
one on my hat.
What
is that symbol called again? Is the trillium?
It's a trillium. Yeah. Trillium. And not to go on another big tangent, but this one in particular is the logo of Ontario, and I find Ontario is a weird place because we have so little provincial pride compared to basically any other province you can think of. We're the only province where our hockey teams don't wear the flag of our province on their shoulder. Like,
really?
Yeah. You look at the Canucks, they got it. You look at Alberta, they got the Alberta flag.
What do we have?
We got nothing. And
I thought they had like a little leaf. Like, I thought the Leafs had a smaller leaf and the Sens had like some other symbol.
But we don't have our province flag, which is too bad because I don't know. I think Ontario is such a, obviously it's like the most populated province. It's got Toronto, it's got Ottawa, I
think that's the problem right there. I think it has Toronto and Ottawa like butting heads.
Maybe, but I mean, I just think, some of the stuff we've come up with is really fucking cool, including this logo that they butchered in the early 2000s. People call it the three guys in a hot tub logo. You'll see it now.
I'll find it and put it up.
And they've kind of gone back to this logo now under Doug Ford, but they butchered it. They made it a little bit different. But anyways, I always thought that this was really pretty. It comes from the sort of tradition.
What's the meaning? Yeah, that's what I've never.
The meaning of this is the trillium, which is the provincial flower or whatever. But there's this sort of tradition of really good Canadian design that kind of emerged around the time of Expo 67, and that's around the time that the flag got turned from
the Union old Jack and all that.
To like the maple leaf, which we all know and love. And so, anyways, I think Canada's always had like a really, really cool design aesthetic, especially in like the latter half of the last century. And I don't know. And a lot of those logos got changed because people always like, oh, we got to come up with a new one, the better one. But those ones I think are super nostalgic and cool. So I kind of made
I really appreciate it. It looks
bunch
awesome.
of fake uniforms with provincial logos and stuff on them. So
it's funny that you're making fake product. It made me think of I've been following these guys on Instagram, and they do like fake action figures for like characters from movies that never got action figures, and they're usually like really silly, like people who are in like one scene.
I love that shit.
Silly. Or like what's a good example? Have you ever seen Idle Hands? The guy's hand gets possessed. Anyways, eventually he cuts off his hand and it runs around. So they made an action figure for just the hand. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of comedic just because it's usually like overpackaged for some really small, tiny little thing, Cool.
I love that stuff, man. Like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like, that's obviously like kind of like fan art or three-dimensional fan art or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is like some like, provincial or municipal fake fan art. I don't know, or fan swag rather.
I dig this, man. That's sweet.
Yeah.
Boom. Looks comfy, looks warm, looks sweet.
So there you go, dude.
Yo, thanks again, man. And I'll play on the arcade, but that's pretty much it.
Cool.
And high fives.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Peace.
That was great.
Subscribe.